You know, a lot has been happening, honestly, and you know, one wonders, especially with regards to the young persons, do we as adults and children have the same rights, or do they also have rights at all?
No, children have rights. Children have rights, but they do not have the same rights with adults. Of course, the law gives more protection to children. You know, issues of that's why you notice sometimes issues of custody, protection. For example, when a child probably loses his or her parents, or when a child gets into trouble, you know, the child is not taken to the normal courts or the normal prisons where you take adults to. You know, we have juvenile homes where they are, you know, they are given special care or special correctional care and all of that. So basically they don't get the same kind of treatment with adults.
You know, rights, when they say to whom much is given, much is demanded. In as much as we're looking at human rights, there's also the angle of responsibility. Now, they'll say, let's put it this way, rights and responsibilities work hand in hand. Yes, people have a right to self-determination, have a right to determine their kind of governance. But what about the responsibilities they have to ensure that those rights are enforced?
Well, you see, for people to be able to enforce their rights, you also have to put in place a system that makes it easy for them to do that. You know, like when I started, I talked about the new fundamental rights enforcement procedure rules that was passed sometime in 2009. So it's also a way of encouraging people to, you know, because what the fundamental rights enforcement procedure rule does is that it opens up the courts. You know, so what used to be the problem before, like issue of standing, for example, tell you that you can't, if you are not the one whose rights is being violated, you can't come to court. Some of those barriers have been removed. So you can go to court to enforce your rights. Somebody can go to court to enforce your rights on your behalf. You know, like what happened in Chime's case. You notice that it was Femi Falana that was trying to enforce the wife's right on her. He was enforcing. He went to court to try to enforce her rights, basically, even though he wasn't the one that was directly involved. So that's what the new rule does, basically. So he has opened up access to the court. But then, like I also pointed out, how many people are aware that they have these rules exist and that they can actually now access the court more, you know, with the new rules. So these are some of the issues that are.
But again, are there any human rights you think should be more protected than any other?
Well, no, I think they're all important. They're all important and they are all interconnected. So that's why I started by pointing out that, you know, it's difficult to separate the rights and say, you know, this one is more important than this one, because they're all tied together. So you can't talk about, let's say, the right to, I used rights, you know, I used the right to life, for example. You can't talk about the right to life without talking about food, shelter, adequate medical care, you know, because it doesn't make sense.
So for you, what do you want? What would you like this day to achieve?
Well, for me, if I'm looking at the theme for this year, I think for me what it does is two things. I think it calls for celebration to an extent, but it also calls for reflection. So for us to reflect on how far we've gone, identify areas where we've not really made progress, and then also retrace our steps in the areas where we're going backwards. For example, so there's cause for celebration because we've made progress. In certain areas we've actually made progress, but then there are also areas where we've not made any progress, and there are areas where we've regressed.
I'm sure that's why this theme is apt. 2013 theme, 20 years working for your rights. And you know, before, we saw Professor Chidiodin Kalu and his team there. We also had him on the Enugu matter. That's the first lady of the state, the issue, then on the same show. But if you look at it critically, apart from that, we're trying to see the kind of awareness we can also get from government that should also be protective of the such rights of its people. How have we fared in that regard? Because time and again we always talk about human rights activists as well as some other rights groups and civil society. But do we get to hear more from the government?
Well, it's not all, I don't think government has failed completely. I think they've also made some huge achievements. The Freedom of Information Act, for example, it's a right issue. So you have to give it to government so that they have, the extent to which they've complied to requests for information is another entirely different debate. But government has also made they've made some progress. The fact that we're talking about the National Human Rights Commission today is, it's also, you also have to give that credit to government, because it was a government that decided to, reform the National Human Rights Commission Act to empower the commission to do what it's doing now.
So in the 20 years, it's one of the gains.
Yeah. So we've made progress, but then there are also areas where we've not made any progress at all, and then there are also areas where we've gone backwards. So for me, like the issue of prison reforms, for example, I think it's an area that we need to take more seriously. The issue of extrajudicial killing, I am very concerned about what is happening in the Northeast, for example, where everything appears to be shrouded in a lot of secrecy. So we really don't know what's happening there. So we're basically relying on what the security agencies tell us. I'm also worried that if we're not careful, we might find ourselves in a situation where we have something similar to what the people in the US have, where you have a Guantanamo Bay where you put people for long periods of time and they don't go through any form of a trial. So these are issues that are coming up, which for me is kind of taking us backwards. But again, we made some gains.
Well, what about the issue of unemployment, poverty? Because there are those who believe that rights abuse, the abuse of human rights, is born out of poverty.
Yeah.
And unemployment. So how about that?
Well, it's also an area that, because to be honest with you, most countries have moved away from the conversation we're having now. So it's about empowering people now, social, economic, housing, employment, people having access to good medical care and all. So that's the conversation that is going on around the world now. And it's one area that government needs to begin to take more seriously. I am also worried, for instance, where government is, for the past, if you've been following policies of government, you see the government appears to be divesting and bringing in private sector, and then there are no social safety nets, for instance, for people. So I was having a conversation with somebody in my office, and he was telling me that the bills for this, the NEPA, the Prt3, what they call them, I don't know, or is it the discos? The bills have doubled and all that. So it's also a right issue, because when those bills go up, the poor may not be able to afford it. So you're going to somehow be denying them access to power, which is also something which also for me is a right issue. In privatizing and divesting and allowing private sector people to take over, the commanding heights of our economy, I think government also needs to begin to think about how to provide safety nets for the poor and vulnerable among us.
Well, in closing, should there be laws protecting our rights?
There are laws. There are already in existence laws that protect our rights. I think the challenge we've had is enforcement. It's enforcement. I know that the court is doing a lot, but I think they need to do more. I also think that government needs to be a bit more proactive in terms of safeguarding some of these rights that we're talking about.
Well, Collins Okeke is a human rights lawyer. We'd like to thank you so much for spending the day with us. It's Human Rights Day here on Channels Television.